Kia ora, everyone. My name is Rosie. I'm a registered nurse on PlunketLine, and we are here to talk about poo tonight.
Yahoo! Cool. My name is Dawn. I've been a Plunket nurse for a number of years, been at PlunketLine for nearly 8 years now, I believe, and I'm looking forward to this chat about all things brown and all things yellow and all things green and all things with a little bit of blood in it sometimes,
Oh,
all
yeah.
things about poo. Really looking forward to this conversation and seeing how it goes. Just reminding everybody that's tuned in tonight that questions, fire those questions through, and we'll try to get to them as we move along there.
Absolutely. Cool. So today we're discussing everything you can think of about poo, really what's normal in the world of babies, toddlers, kids, poo, what's not normal, red flags, that kind of thing, constipation and diarrhea, as well as advice for dealing with both, how breastfeeding affects your baby's poo, that kind of thing, because it can be a little bit different, and toileting advice for toddlers, some toilet training stuff, that kind of thing, and skin advice for kids in nappies. But if there's anything else you can think of, as Dawn said, definitely flick it through and we can address that as well. So if we get started, what our most common question is on PlunketLine, really? What's normal? What does normal poo look like, Dawn? It's a bit of a
Right,
complicated one, isn't it?
isn't there such a huge variety of what is normal, just like for adults, right? You know, we all poo differently. So there is a huge variety of what is normal, and that's dependent on age groups. It's dependent on what you're eating, and it's dependent on regularity. Everything. There's a huge variety of colour. Like we get a lot of calls from parents, don't we, about green poo. And green
Yes.
poo in a well baby can be a very normal thing. It can be normal. So poo can be green, it can be yellow, it can be brown. As I said earlier, sometimes it can have a little bit of tiny drops of blood in it. That's okay. But we'll talk about that further as we get into the conversation. Frequency is also really varied, and especially around those breastfed babies. Hey.
Yep. So I have a 5-month-old, and she poos probably 4 or 5 times a day.
And that's normal for her, right?
Oh
Yeah. Yeah. How do you describe her as being your splody baby?
she's a splody bum girl. My older boy also just goes, "Oh, Eva, you splody bum girl."
So yeah, huge variety of normal, and if you're wanting to have a look at what might be normal and what's not normal, the Kids Health website is a really fantastic website. It covers everything, right, that may occur for your babies and children from the day they're born until they're teenagers. And so if you put diarrhea in their search bar, or if you put constipation in their search bar, got some really good information around what poo looks like and what is normal and what's not normal as well. So that's always a really good place to go for any concerns that parents might have around anything.
Yeah, and super user friendly too. There's literally just a search bar right at the top. You type in whatever and it brings you all the information. It's great.
Yeah, really fantastic. New Zealand based website, so really totally appropriate. And Plunket has input into that, as well as to the Ministry of Health and Paediatricians and lots of other really good services. So really good New Zealand website that we absolutely love, and we always recommending to our callers as they come through for further reassurance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, sweet. So a bit about kind of what's not normal, which again is really hard because there is such a huge variety of normal. But there are a few red flags to look at. Things like if your baby or child has constant tummy pain, whether it's with pooing or other times during the day. The occasional tummy ache, fairly normal, but if they're constantly complaining about pain, then that is definitely worth getting checked out.
Mm,
And it's also worth saying for any of this stuff, if you're not sure, give PlunketLine a ring and we can do a more sort of specific evaluation of your child.
mm, mm,
Um, because, as Dawn said, what's normal for one child is not going to be normal for another.
mm,
So it's very specific. Um, having babies often have mucousy poos, but if you've got a baby that's got constantly really, really mucousy poos, especially if it's along with pain and that kind of thing, it's worth checking in with your GP. It can be a sign of intolerances, but it also can be absolutely nothing. And this is, again, where my child comes in. I've had this conversation with
mm.
my GP, and she's happy it's nothing, but it is definitely worth checking out.
And so sometimes when we might hear more about those mucousy poos too is around that teething time where there is a
Yes.
change
Yeah.
in consistency, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, or if they've had a cold and they're swallowing
Mm,
lots of their snot, that kind of thing, then
mm,
mucus is very, very normal. Um,
mm,
and Dawn, you mentioned before about little spots of blood. So little
mm,
spots of blood can be really normal, especially if a baby's pooing really frequently. It can just irritate the insides of their bowels a little bit, that kind of thing. But if your baby's having lots and lots of blood in their poo, then that definitely is worth getting checked out.
mm, mm. And just
Um,
on there, I think too, if you are having concerns around those different looking poses to be giving us a call, and
yeah.
we do have the ability to use the telehealth service that we share
Mm,
with Helpline, do an assessment, and we're able to look at photos. And just to give further reassurance around maybe the amount and
mm.
the amount of blood, and mostly it's about the amount, really, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, for
Mm,
sure. And like other symptoms as well.
mm,
But it's a good thing you brought up photos, Dawn. If you do have
mm,
concerns about your child and you are going to take them to the GP, as
mm,
unpleasant as it might be, having a whole bunch of photos of your baby's poo on your camera roll,
yeah,
it's worth having them so that you can refer
yeah.
back if you need to.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
I'm
And
always
keeping a
telling parents,
diary.
take photos, yes, and a
Yeah,
diary is
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Beautiful
yeah.
photographic memories of what the poo looks like to share with the GPs. Mm,
Yeah. Going along with tummy pain really is if they're not eating. Obviously,
mm,
toddlers and babies, they have varying diets. Some babies, some more toddlers. Some toddlers won't eat much anyway, or they'll eat nothing one day and then eat you out of house and home the next day. But if you're
mm,
noticing a constant change in behavior where they're not eating as much, and especially if they're not drinking as much, if that's
mm,
coming with any tummy pain or changes in sort of bowel habits, then that's worth getting checked out as well.
mm,
Um, and again, as Dawn said, green poo's very normal, especially if your baby's been sick. It can be sort of a shedding, like all the virus and yucky stuff coming out as well. But again, if they're constantly really green for like sort of weeks or more, then it's worth getting checked out again.
mm,
You
mm,
see, we're
mm,
getting a very common theme of mostly normal, but if it's
mm.
going on for ages and ages, that kind of thing.
And it depends on a wider clinical picture too, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
is their growth and how is their behaviour? So it's not just about
yeah.
green poo. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, for sure. And most of these things, there's no just a change in poo is almost always fine, but it is when
mm,
it comes with all these other things, isn't it? Um,
totally.
the other one I had noted down is really, really pale white poo. That's worth checking out. And the one thing that is most seriously needed to know is if your baby has really black, tarry looking poo, then that
Kind of
definitely needs to be seen.
kind of like that poo that they did when they were brand new babies, hey?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So if your older child has poo that looks sort of like that, then definitely give us a call on PlunketLine or take them in to be seen immediately. Sometimes it's especially if baby's breastfeeding and you've got bleeding nipples, it can be blood from that, but we always want to get it checked out in case it is blood from the gut. Um, but yeah, most of these things are just they're quite hard to assess on their own. So we're always here 24/7. Um, and yeah, we can have a comprehensive assessment. Anything to add on that, Dawn?
No, I think that just about covers it. If any of our viewers have got any questions around any of that, then start firing those through to the chat, and we will get to those at some point throughout this chat.
Yeah, for sure. So going on from not normal, constipation and diarrhea. What do they look like?
So constipation in an older child particularly would be, this is a baby who is not just exclusively breastfed. So an exclusively breastfed baby, they can go from pooing every single time you feed them to suddenly not pooing for up to 10 days. And that's considered completely normal, isn't it?
Yeah, that often surprises people, doesn't it? Worries
Yeah,
people when their baby hasn't pooed for a few days, and then we
yeah,
tell them that,
yeah.
and they're like, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah. I always say prepare for a punami because it's coming, right? And so as long as your little baby is still passing wind in that time, as long as they're not showing signs of being really uncomfortable, so lots of crying happening and nothing that you do will settle them down from there, then that's a different thing. But a baby who is happy and content and not pooing for up to 10 days considered completely normal. Yeah. And sometimes up to 14 days, I believe that some of them will leave them for. Yeah, so that's considered completely normal. And the older child, that would be, we'd be expecting them to poo every 2 to 3 days at least. And again, there's a huge variance. Some of us poo every day. Some of us poo more than once a day. It's the same for our kids as well. And some of us will go a couple of days without doing anything. But it's when those other things come into it, so signs of discomfort, then that's a different scenario in terms of constipation. But every 2 to 3 days would be kind of like expected normal.
And what would a sort of constipated poo look like?
So quite dry and hard looking. Sometimes they can look quite sandy looking as well, and they can be really smelly because obviously they've been sitting there for a while. You want to try and avoid getting to that situation, because what can sometimes happen when we get to that situation is that the poo can become so stuck there that babies and children will start pooing around that stuck poo. And so then it just becomes a little bit harder to manage further on down the track.
For sure. It's funny you say sandy looking, because then of course toddlers go to preschool and they eat the sand from the sand, so their poo looks sandy even though it's fine.
Oh, what about those kids that eat the paint at daycare or kindy and then come home and they've got these blue streaks in their poos and things like that from eating the paint? We've had pools like that before, haven't we?
Yes, even icing, like coloured icing, sometimes can change the colour of your child's poo. So that's a surprise when you change their nappy.
And some of the other foods too, right? Can do that as well. Blackberries and blueberries.
Yes, beetroot, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some young babies also sort of around the 4 to 6 month, maybe even younger, will often look like they're straining. And we do get calls about babies that their parents are worried that they're constipated because they're like sitting there straining, going red in the face, and then nothing's happening. This is actually like a known phenomenon called dyschezia, and it's basically where babies are learning to use their abdominal muscles to push poo through, but it doesn't necessarily mean they actually need to poo. And it should just like ease off with age. Of course, if they're like crying and really upset and seem to be really uncomfortable or not drinking, then it's worth investigating that further. But if it is just those periods of straining and then all is fine, it's nothing to be concerned about, and it's very normal. All right.
So, and talking about constipation, what are some of the things that parents can maybe try out, Rosie?
So your main thing, and the first thing I would suggest, is making sure that they're getting enough fluid. Babies, once they've started on solids, should have a little bit of water with each of their meals. They don't need to have loads and loads, but enough to sort of flush it through. And as they get older, making sure that they're drinking plenty of water. Milk is still fine, that kind of thing, and managing to flush it through. And then making sure that their dietary fiber is, so these are more preventative measures, although they definitely can help as well once the baby's constipated. But increased fiber in their diet, obviously age appropriate, but lots of fruit and veggies, sometimes sort of higher fiber cereals, things like Wheat Bix and stuff, can work really well. And then, of course, once there is a problem, there are lots of non-pharmacological ways to help that, like added fiber or fruit juice, depending on the child. Like once they're above 12 months, you could give them sort of a cup of apple juice a day, and that may help. Babies who are bottle fed, so 3 months and above, if they're having issues with their bowels, they can have a bit of boiled, cooled down boiled water. The thing with that is making sure it's not more than 50 mils twice a day, because then that can offset electrolytes and things, but it can help them just pass that through a little bit.
I always suggest that when you're offering that water is to maybe offer it just ever so slightly warm, because you know what it's like yourself, if you drink a glass of cold water, your stomach can kind of go, I didn't really appreciate that. So sometimes that's really good. We do, sometimes we will suggest in a baby over 3 months of age is you can add 5 mils of pure orange, apple or prune juice to that cold boiled water. And just so that you are aware, if you're not wanting to make your own, there is a brand out there, it's called Homegrown, and you buy it in the cold drink section at your supermarket. It comes in a solid white bottle, 100% juice. So if you're not wanting to make your own, that's out there as well.
The other thing with young kids is like gentle tummy massage, what's called bicycle legs, which is basically when you lie them on their back and hold their legs and move them up and down gently like they're riding a bike. That can just help everything move through a little bit. And often you'll know it's working because you often get lots of farts out of them doing that. Nice warm bath, that kind of thing. The kind of things you would do as an adult if you had a bit of a guts ache, that kind of thing. With toilet trained kids, also just encouraging them to sit on the toilet so that they're in that sort of squatting position can help as well. Of course, if nothing is working and things are getting worse and worse, there are also medications. You can get some stool softeners over the counter, although I would always suggest with kids at least talking to the pharmacist, and then if it's sort of a really ongoing issue, talking to the GP and potentially getting something prescribed. Anything else you can think of, Dawn?
Yeah, just reminded me of 40 plus years ago when my babies were little. Just reminded me of my grandmother helping my babies to poo. Used to put a whole lot of newspaper on the floor and just hold my babies behind their knees, under their legs, and between their legs, and and the back up on her stomach, and of course, the gravity helped with them being able to, so creating like a toilet for my little babies before they were sitting up on their own and things, that seemed to help as well. I mean, it can't be
good
easy
idea.
to poo lying down, right?
Yeah, it's not a very natural position, is it?
No,
I'm glad
no.
actually that you brought up grandparents and things, because we do get some calls, especially
Yes.
from people who have said, "Oh, my mum said," or "My grandma said," or something, to give baby brown sugar mixed with water.
That's right.
We absolutely do not encourage this anymore. It
Mm,
used to be in Plunket books, it absolutely
that's
did.
right. Mm,
But as healthcare moves on and science move on, we realize that some of these things maybe aren't the best. So we definitely do not recommend the brown sugar in water
mm,
anymore.
mm,
Never mind the
mm,
fact that it doesn't really work, tooth
mm,
development, that kind of thing.
mm,
Just, yeah.
mm,
And if you
mm,
do have parents or grandparents insisting that that's the answer, get them to call us, and we can
mm,
give them some more
mm,
other
mm,
tips.
mm, mm, mm. So we haven't really covered like a definition of diarrhea here today.
No,
So
true.
in terms of diarrhea, we'd kind of like be thinking more than 6 poos in 6 hours is kind of like a guideline, and other symptoms present with that. So, as we talked about, that runny poos can be normal. With diarrhea, there's usually something else happening with that, and that might be vomiting, particularly. Those things normally go together. D's and B's, you might hear it referred to. So diarrhea and vomiting, fairly common, especially when kids are getting into that kindy and daycare environment, and they're getting out there and, passing gremlins from one child to another.
Yep.
So it can be quite common as they start in those kind of environments. So it's about what else is happening with all of this pooing, because there's also something called normal toddler diarrhea, and that is just, it's diarrhea and we can't find a cause for it, and everything else is okay. And that can, unfortunately, usually will start anytime from 6 months onwards, and our resources suggest that it can last for up to 3 years. In my experience, I've never heard of a child where it's lasted that long for, but it can be there, and it can last for a little bit of time. And again, as long as they're growing okay, then we wouldn't have any concerns about that, as long as there's nothing else happening with that. So yeah, might be stomach pain, might be vomiting with it, not eating at all, distended stomach, constant blood in the bowel motions, and signs of dehydration. So in our kids, particularly in our little babies, what the signs of dehydration that we look for is whether they are drinking anything, if their mouth and tongue looks dry inside, if that the soft spot on the top of their head, if that feels sunken in. And so that's something we'll always ask you to check if you're calling in and we're worried about the level of hydration. It's just and it's really good to get familiar with where that is, because right at the top of the head, and I usually say use a straight line from the nose to the back of the head and draw an imaginary line from the front of one ear to the other, and it's usually just forward of where that true points meet. That front fontanelle, that doesn't usually completely close over until around about 15 to 18 months. Yes, it gets smaller and smaller. So how to define a sunken fontanelle is it would feel quite tight and tense, and it would probably go to, say, 1/3 of your first finger joint, a sunken fontanelle. So we get you to check that when we're talking to you. I talked about the dry mouth, not taking any fluids. What have I missed there, Rosie?
Well, urine output, but having said that, in
yes.
a baby in nappies with diarrhea, that can be really hard to assess, because obviously the nappy is going to be wet from the wet poo. But in older kids who are toilet trained, if they're not weeing, or if you do think your baby's nappies are a lot drier than usual, then that is often one of the first signs. But yeah, it is hard to assess with with diarrhea as well.
So just as a sideline to that, what are we expecting around wet nappies?
Well, that will depend on age. So, but we would expect pretty much for any baby in nappies to be peeing at least once every 6 hours, and not just a little dribble, like a proper, a good pee. The nappy isn't necessarily going to be absolutely soaking, but at least some. And also, like any babies, it's what differs from their normal rather than one set for any baby. So part of our triage assessment when we're talking about diarrhea and vomiting is your child peeing the same as they usually would in the last sort of 6 hours.
And no change in colour or smell, of course, with that.
Yeah,
and
that really dark yellow or orange smelly wee is often on your way to.
And equally, with dehydration, with constipation, that can sometimes be a cause of not passing urine as well. So just something to be aware of here. Just put it out there at the moment. Just with the disposable nappies, so those disposable nappies, sometimes we'll get calls from parents concerned about the urine. Just reminding people that those disposable nappies, they are designed to pull everything away from the surface. So sometimes they can seem quite dry where baby has wet. And we, of course, don't use the wetness indicator because, how can manufacturers guarantee that that's going to be an absolute thing that works every single time? So it's about what do you see and what are you feeling? Just a wet nappy.
And if you're not sure, and it can be hard, but if you're not sure, just grabbing one of their new dry ones and just sort of comparing it to see how heavy it is. Of course, if they've only done a few drops of pee, that's not going to tell you much, but it might give you a bit of an indication.
And just pick up the phone and call us. Hey, that's what we're for 24/7.
Absolutely. Definitely. All right, so moving on a little bit from that, let's talk about the breastfed bubbas for a bit. What is it with breastfed bubs that can make a difference with mum's diet?
So some of those spicy foods particularly, and some of those foods that we know upset parents can upset babies as well. What they say is that if you're a breastfeeding mum, you should be able to eat everything in moderation. So it's fine to have that cup of coffee, or it's fine to have that piece of chocolate, but probably not so much that whole block of chocolate, or 6 or so cups of coffee. That might be a little bit upsetting on babies' bellies. Normally, if you've eaten spicy foods during your pregnancy, that's usually what the baby would be expecting. So it's just those foods that upset yourself, right?
Yeah, and I think things that vary from your normal as well. So if you normally eat heaps of spicy food, you might be okay. But if you don't eat a whole lot and then suddenly you have a really hot curry, that may cause some issues for baby's tummy, but it's likely to cause you issues for your tummy first.
I think the other thing to talk about in here too is antibiotics as well. So,
yes, of course.
Like if mum's taking an antibiotic, we may see a change in baby's bowel motions as well as a result of that. And equally, if baby's needing to have antibiotics as well. That can tend to happen as well. So I'll have more frequent bowel motions as well.
I would say with the food and breastfeeding, it is probably less of an issue than most people think it is. People do tend to think that what they're eating makes a huge difference, whereas as long as you're sort of your regular-ish diet, you should be fine.
Yeah. Absolutely. So
Right.
just moving on from those little babies, what
Mm.
would your advice be around parents of toddlers who are doing that holding on of the poo and not
Oh,
wanting to get that poo out? Has that been your experience with your kids, Rosie, at any
no,
point?
thankfully it hasn't, but it is a really, really common issue.
Mm,
Tackling sort of poo shyness and poo holding on
mm, mm,
for older
mm,
kids. Um,
mm,
it often
mm,
stems around them having some kind of unpleasant experience at some point. So if they've done a
mm,
poo that was like a little bit hard, so it was a little bit sore, then
mm,
they're scared to try again. And one
mm,
thing that
mm,
seems to be an issue, which I would have never thought of until I had to toilet train my own child, is splashback. That if they
mm,
do a poo
mm,
and the water from the toilet splashes back on their bum, they're not going to want to go toilet again.
mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
so it's about really consistent sort of messaging around that, being gentle and kind, because these kind of things are happening, especially with toilet training. It's such a huge thing to
Mm,
undertake for
mm,
them.
mm.
Like, it's probably up until now it's probably their biggest change in behavior. um
Totally. Mm,
so I would always err on the side of sort of letting things go a little bit, and if they do need a little bit more time for poos, then they just do. um
allow it. Mm,
what I would suggest is, if they're asking for a nappy just to do a poo, then keeping the nappies in the bathroom, putting one
mm,
on, staying in the bathroom for the whole process, putting it on, taking it
mm,
off, wiping it up, just so
mm,
they are making that connection with, oh yeah, we do poos in the bathroom. Um,
mm, mm,
if it is a splashback issue, you can put a little bit of toilet paper just in the bottom of the toilet, so it's less likely to splash. There is
mm,
a really good story that you can just
mm.
Google, called what's it called? Just
It's a phone
Mr.
app. It's
Yeah.
called
Oh, Mr.
Pooh
Poo
Goes
Goes
Home. Pooh Goes Home to Pooh Land. It's
That's right.
fantastic. Yeah, just an app on your phone that you can get. It's free, easy to get, and kids really enjoy it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I just sorry.
I just reading about it yesterday, and it's by a psychology student, and it's like separating sort of the poo from the child, so the child
Mm,
doesn't feel that it's their fault.
mm,
And it's had some really good feedback, and
mm,
it's just,
mm,
it's funny for
mm.
kids. Kids think poo's funny,
Yeah,
so it just
yeah, yeah,
makes it a bit lighter and a bit less
yeah.
stressful.
Absolutely. Rosie, I just wanted to go back to where you talked about going into the bathroom to
Mm,
recognise that that was the place that you went to. So I talk to parents about from a very early age about talking to their child about what they're doing. So, mum or dad, oh, I need to go to the toilet, I need to do poos, I need to do wees, whatever words you're going to use to
mm,
describe that function, just so that babies and children get that message from a very early age, that connection thing or word association thing. Oh yeah, mum,
mm,
dad, they're saying that, and that's where they go to do that, so that it becomes
mm.
a normal thing. Mm, mm,
Mm. Yeah, and actually on the same kind of messaging, as I know if your child does like a really stinky poo and you're having to change their nappy, it is really hard not to be like, oh, yuck, disgusting.
mm,
But they're of course seeing that, and we don't want to create
mm,
like shame around poo. We want to give them the
mm.
message that everyone poos and it's
Yeah,
normal and that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I totally appreciate that sometimes that is easier said than done. Um,
Mm,
but
mm,
yeah, that
mm,
kind of thing. And
mm,
also taking children who are toilet training to the bathroom quite regularly, sort of
mm,
20 minutes, half an hour after a meal, that kind of thing. Times where you'd normally start to feel something going on in your gut. Again, just making those associations. But I think the main
mm,
thing is knowing that these things do take time, and it's a huge change for everyone
mm.
involved.
And sometimes it's just about if it's not working, it's about just going back, giving it a complete
Mm,
break for a couple of weeks, and then
mhm,
maybe considering the slow reintroduction. But
yeah,
again, pick up the phone, call us, have a conversation with it. That whole toilet training thing. There's been such big changes around that since we're not having to have our kids toilet trained to be able to go to kindies and things like that. And again, that whole grandparent expectation thing, like, oh, you were toilet trained at 17 months. We know so much more about this now that we are changing our focus about the way that we do these things.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also worth knowing that boys often are a lot harder than girls. And I will say, as someone who gives this advice on a daily, my boy is 3.5 and he is just toilet trained.
Yeah.
So, that's normal. He's not late.
Yeah, totally. They just get so busy, right? So busy that pooing or peeing,
no one wants to stop and go to the toilet.
No, we don't have time for that type of thing. And I just want to say, just getting back to the grandparent things, grandparents are welcome to call us as well. And, we can talk to them about what the latest thing might be, in terms of anything to do with your baby and they're feeling a little bit of pressure or stress from grandparents.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're like worried about looking like the bad guy, get them to call us. We can
totally.
We can tell them what, as you said, what the most current advice is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's also worth saying that kids who are holding their poo a lot, if you're pushing it too much and they're really not wanting to, they will likely get constipated, holding and holding and holding. So it definitely should be something that is quite low stress for them, so that they've got always got that option to go to the go in their nappy. So last up, before we have some questions, what advice have you got, Dawn, for skincare for kids in nappies?
So, especially when they're pooing so much, it's about protecting that skin. So, the same nappy area cares that we advise parents is just using water in a soft cloth, absolutely fine. No need, and it's probably when they do have a nappy rash, it's good to stay away from nappy wipes and things like that because they can be a little bit irritating. Even the ones that say, perfume free, they can just be a little bit too harsh on their sensitive skin. So just water in a soft cloth, patting it dry, or one of the things that I suggest to parents, so especially when the nappy rash is fairly bad and you're not wanting to have any contact with it, is if you have a blow dryer, flick your blow dryer on cool and flick that over the area, and it's a really good way to dry it without having any contact with it. And then lots and lots of your nappy barrier cream, something like your Sudocrem or your Vet Panthen. Talk to your local pharmacist and see what they would recommend for nappy rash if you haven't already got something. Then chatting to them around what you might do. And having some nappy-free time is really good as well. Put lots of towels around those little boys because those fountains go for miles.
Definitely much easier when they're not moving.
Yes,
once they're moving,
totally.
It becomes quite messy. Although outside, especially in summer, obviously being very careful with sunscreen and things like that. I will actually say also from personal experience, cloth nappies, they'll likely leak sooner, but changing them a bit more often because they don't have the same draw away effect as disposable nappies. They're a great option. And I use them myself, but they do need to be changed more often, really, especially if you've got a baby with. And if they do have really, really severe nappy rash, I often suggest to cloth parents to put them in disposables just for a couple of days.
So we've just got some questions coming through. So is slight green poo normal for an exclusively breastfed baby with no other symptoms? And is it normal for them to poop only once a day? Both of those, very, very normal. So green poo is normal for any age group, as long as there is nothing else happening there. And in an exclusively breastfed baby, they can poo every single time you feed them pooing, once or twice a day, and then after they are 4 weeks of age, they can go for up to 10 days without pooing. And again, that would be considered normal. If you are concerned about that type of thing, just pick up the phone and we can offer you some further reassurance.
Yeah, for sure. Next question's kind of, you kind of just answered that. Is it normal for a 4-month-old baby not to poo for 2 or 3 days? Absolutely. As we said, breastfed babies can go up to 10 days, but even formula fed babies can go sort of 2, 3, 4 days, as long as they're comfortable. That's absolutely fine.
How to relieve constipation. So we covered this a little bit. So over 3 months of age, 50 mils of cold boiled water, offering it slightly warm can sometimes help. And then you can consider adding 5 mils of pure orange, apple, or prune juice to that. Just depending on the age of the child, increasing the fibre. So all of those things that help you to poo are going to help your babies, age dependent on whether they can have that food. That's going to help them to poo as well. So if they're over 9 months of age, then kiwi fruit, because we know that kiwi fruit helps most people to poo. There's some really good information. Again, I go back to the Kids Health website, kidshealth.org.nz, really respectable New Zealand website. If you put constipation into their search bar, it's going to bring up some really good information around when you need to be concerned about it, and some of those things that you can try to help relieve that constipation. Again, calling us, that's what we're there for. We can run through some ideas. We can do an assessment just to make sure that you don't need to be immediately concerned about constipation.
Yeah. Actually, on the subject of places to look, it's not specifically constipation, but all things toilet training, that kind of thing. The Continence NZ website is great as well. They have free webinars about just normal toilet training, and then any issues, kids with extra needs, that kind of thing. They've got loads of information on there, so they're great. Cool. So next question, is black poo normal? No, it's not. But we need to be, the thing is that often dark green looks black. So it is really hard to say sometimes. So as we said a bit earlier, if your baby's poo is actually black and sort of tarry looking, like it looked in the first sort of day of life, that meconium look, then no, that's definitely not normal and needs to be checked. But dark green can be really normal, and it often looks black. So make sure you're having a really good look at it in good light. And no, it feels a bit strange to be inspecting your baby's poo that closely. But dark green definitely can be, and if you're not sure, again, just give us a call. Taking a photo of it with flash can often show more of a true color as well, and then we can go from there. But actual black poo, no, that's not normal, but it's sometimes hard to know.
The question around continuous poo that was runny with white chunks, again, that would depend on a wider picture around what those white chunks look like. Because continuous poo can be normal, and that normal toddler diarrhea that we talked about, that can last for quite some time, and just like viral diarrhea, so different to normal toddler diarrhea, that can last for up to 7 days before that resolves. 5 to 7 days is what's suggested. So the question around the continuous poo and the runny white chunk bits in it, again, you need a little bit more information around what that may have looked like. So, if you're seeing that, again, just calling us and allowing us to do an assessment and working through that.
Yeah, for sure. Got a question here about signs of celiac disease. I will admit this is not something I know a huge amount about
Yeah,
in younger
yeah.
children. Do you know anything about that, Dawn?
I think, looking at family history, first of
Oh, yeah.
all, and if there is a family history, then having a conversation with GPs around that. Again, I think it's not a common thing that we get calls about. That would, I think, a referral back to GP. But first of all, giving us a call and then we can do an assessment.
Yeah. And I think likely, from what I know with celiac for older people, there's a lot of sort of pain that goes with it, which we would be saying get them checked out anyway. So then if the GP feels that a celiac test is a good idea, then they can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, just looking at that family history, especially through there. Do star charts for a poo help, or does it create an expectation of getting something each time they poo? I'm all for rewards, right? Everybody loves a chocolate fish from time to time for doing good.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is one of those things that is really child dependent. Some kids just they need something. They need something to motivate them to go. And I think stickers is fine. It's not going to do any harm. All of everything suggests staying away from food-based rewards. Realistically, what works. And they're not going to expect it forever, because it does eventually just become second nature. I mean, none of us are expecting a reward every time we go to the toilet.
No.
It does just become second nature, so it's not going to last forever. So if that's what helps motivate them, absolutely. I mean, if it's still like pulling teeth and you're saying like, you get this, and they're still really resistant, then it may be that they're just not ready.
Not
But
ready.
if it's just the little nudge they need towards it, then go ahead, I'd say.
What about a 1-month-old baby? How often should my baby poo? She's farting a lot, but hasn't pooed in a few days. We did talk about that slightly earlier. So over 4 months of age, they can go for up to 10 days and they can do this really suddenly too, can't they? Like they can be pooing, every single time you feed them, just suddenly not pooing for days, and that is considered normal in a baby over 4 weeks of age, as long as they are farting. Doesn't it get pretty smelly, doesn't it, when they haven't pooed for a little bit? That's the times that I always say that you can probably expect a punami. And just be prepared for that.
I always say, if you want your child to poo, put them in completely white clothes. You know they'll do it. You know they'll do
it. Lovely. And then you get the nice yellow stains, right?
Yep. What do you recommend for starting toilet time? A potty, chair, or the mini seat with a stool? I think again it's quite child dependent, isn't it?
Yeah. I think they both have their pros and cons, don't they? Like, a potty you can pretty much take everywhere with you if that's what you want to do. A toilet, my preference would always be a toilet, and that's because I think that's where they're going to end up anyway. Hopefully,
it's kind of saving an extra step, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so straight onto the toilet. Sometimes the little seats do help them because they help them
Yeah.
feel more secure. Like they're sitting on that big toilet seat can seem like they're sitting at the top of a big hole, and they might fall
Yeah.
down there. And
Yeah.
then we start to get those children that are frightened to be going in there. So just talking about that in terms of sitting on the toilet. To do poos or to do ways is I suggest that try and avoiding the use of toys and books when they're sitting on the toilet, because when you're playing with a toy, focusing on a toy or focusing on a book, you're focusing on that. So you're not recognizing what's happening between here and here, so between the brain and the bum. So you're not getting that sensation about what's happening with my body when I do need to wee or when I do need to poo. So I always suggest that trying to avoid the use of those distractions in the toilet. And don't spend hours in there as well, Get in there, get the job done and get out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a good. I will say with potties, what we did is if you're finding that your child's just not quite getting to the toilet on time, especially in those really early days, having a potty and then making the sort of the place for the potty closer and closer to the bathroom, so they're sort of getting used to just holding it for those extra few seconds, and then eventually just getting rid of it. And my top tip is, once you're not using it anymore, put it in the boot of your car, so that when you're in the car and your child goes, "I need to wee," you've got somewhere for them to go.
Somewhere to pull over and go on the potty.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That topic took up so much time, and I'm sure there's probably more questions out there. It's been a fantastic 45 minutes, and been really, really good. Thanks, Rosie.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and as we've said several times, any questions, just pick up the phone. PlunketLine's there 24/7, and we can give more specific answers for sort of those more niggly questions. But Kids Help, as Dawn said, even the Plunket website, lots of places to go. Yeah. Absolutely.
And those links will be posted in here. Also, the app that we talked about, Poo Goes Home to Poo Land, free app on your phone that can be encouraging children around pooing and the normalness of it. So that those links have all been posted there for you. So if there's nothing else coming through there, we're here for you guys. Please just pick up the phone and call us 24/7.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Good night.